Hey guys, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End. We are on to part two. I fully understand if some of you skipped part one because while it was not disrespectful or gratuitously graphic for, just shock value, the crime scene reading was hard to get through, just even being bare bones about the whole thing. Now, in this section, I will be using, little nicknames, little, YouTube approved words instead of real words. So if you see something on the screen and I don't say that particular word, that is the reason why YouTube doesn't like certain words, as we well know. So let's get into this. The evidence that connects the Odinites to the murders 38 and this footnote says marked as Exhibit 29. Defense has provided an infographic highlighting parties discussed in this section. Now, I have looked, a lot of the exhibits are not linked to this, obviously, because a lot of the exhibits had very sensitive materials in them, pictures of the crime scene and people that are not on trial yet. I mean, as much as, you know, they might have links and circumstantial evidence linking them, the people that are mentioned in this Frank's motion right now that seem to be, fairly substantive suspects, in my personal opinion, again, YouTube, my personal opinion only, they are still considered innocent. They have not been charged with anything, so I can see why the point was made to keep those out of the public eye for now. For Rick's defense team, it has been hard to gain a grasp of how to define Odinism. A March 15th, 2009 or 2008 article in the winter issue of the Southern Poverty Law Center's here in the SPLCA intelligence report identified as, quote, the nation's preeminent periodical monitoring the radical right in the US. Yeah, leave that radical left alone. They don't do nothing. Said this about Odinism in 1998, a neo pagan religion drawing on the images of fiercely proud boar hunting Norsemen and their white skinned Aryan womenfolk. Okie dokie. Is taking root among all the bad people and the white supreme pizza groups across the nation. Astaro leaders have opened prison ministries at least 5 states recently, and many jailed followers are heavily white supreme pizzas. A leading proselytizer, imprisoned Terry David Lane, has been writing prolifically and influencing many to adopt his interpretations of a badist sort. Bob Matthews, the late founder of the order of which Lane was a member, adopted a series of related beliefs. A Denver dingleberry who confessed to a November murder of a man because he was black bears an Astoro tattoo. Some key Astaro leaders are known bad people with bad thoughts about Jewish people. Quote, suddenly, said Phil Rodriguez, a gang investigator with the Arizona State Prison System, Asturo has become the big fad. Asturo, an Icelandic word meaning belief in the Astur or gods, has been officially recognized as a religion in Iceland since 1972. Further down, the SPLC states the following: Odinism, which is closely related to Astaru, was much favored in, Germany during the bad times, during the Troubles. Its Nordic Teutonic mythology was a bedrock belief for key Third Reich leaders. It was an integral part of the initiation rites and cosmology of the elite bad people who supervised the struggling Austrian painter. I think y'all know who I'm talking about. And they worked in the death camps. So Odinism has been kind of co-opted by bad people. Do we get the point? I will say it comes from the SPLC, who seems to be tricked by 4chan every other year, so grain of salt from the messengers, but maybe at this point they have it right. So there you go. In addition to white supreme component that exists in Odinism, there seems to be an additional dark demonic component of Odinism, at least if articles concerning Odinist human sacrifice and imagery found on the internet, coupled with imagery and language found on Brad Holder's Facebook, are to be considered. As an example, the defense has attached Exhibits 30 through 34. Exhibits 30 and 31 are found on the internet. Exhibits 32, 33, and 34 are different versions of the same image that Brad Holder posted on his Facebook page. As you can see, law enforcement wrote the words, quote, painting by Brad Holder, Odin hanging from quote unquote world tree on Exhibit 34. This appears to be something that law enforcement would have used in a PowerPoint presentation. Additionally, Kevin Murphy, who is a state trooper that investigated the Odinist angle, said this about Odinism. Quote, it seemed to me to border on almost a satanic type of worshiping sacrifice, but I couldn't really wrap my brain around it. End quote. 39, emphasis added, and that's from his deposition, page 6, lines 13 through 16. Exhibit 30 is from a website on Odinism of a man hanging upside down from a tree who has been sliced in the neck with his blood dripping on the ground. This man's arms are posed similarly to Abby's at the crime scene. This man's legs are also similarly posed to Abby's at the crime scene. His left leg is straight, his right knee is bent, or his right leg is bent at the knee. The only difference is that the man's right leg is placed over the left leg, while Abby's right leg was posed under her left leg. Exhibit 31 is an image from a website on Odinism of a man wearing antlers similar to the crude way in which sticks were formed on Abby's head. Exhibit 31 also resembles the crime scene in that the man's left leg is straight while his right leg is bent at the knee and placed under his left leg, just as Abby was found. 40. And that is, the man's hands are not similar to the way Abby's had been posed. So there is, but it is strikingly similar enough for them to have taken notice. Now, the human, chemo anxiety machine that lives up here in our cranium is trained to see patterns where there might not be patterns, but this is looking patternish, if you will. Both exhibits 30 and 31 were found on the internet by Ryan Brocher during his internet research, and this 41, it comes from his affidavit. The defense included exhibits 32 and 33 in the event that the court might think something like, quote, well, just because those images are available on the internet concerning Odinism has nothing to do with Brad Holder, end quote. Exhibits 32 and 33 are image that the defense located in the state's discovery. Both exhibits are the same image, with Exhibit 33 being a close up version. The image itself is a painting produced by the hands of Brad Holder. As the court can see, Brad Holder painted that what the defense would call a very creepy serial killer looking image of a naked man hanging from a tree. Holder's painting is similar in appearance to exhibits 30 and 31. Also, in Holder's self made painting, you can see that just like Abby, the hanged man's right leg is bent at the knee, angled toward the man's straight left leg. Again, an overly inquisitive man down in Georgia, Ryan Boucher, began piecing all this together without having the benefit of crime scene photos. Yet, Unified Command, with the benefit of crime scene photos, apparently either incompetently or intentionally failed to piece together these images, which would have caused any curious investigator to continue pursuing Brad Holder as a suspect. Ryan Boucher's curiosity led him to continue his research into runes and Odinism. Boucher's research led to an article that is the primer, for Odinist sacrifice. The defense has attached this article by Daniel Bray entitled, quote, Sacrifice and Sacrificial Ideology in Norse Religion. Footnote 42, the article is Exhibit 35. Within Bray's article, he discusses the history of human sacrifice to Odin that exists in the pagan Norse religion. Unified Command claims that Odinism was ruled out early because of findings of a Purdue professor. However, Unified Command now claims that it can't remember the name of the professor. You know what? Barney Fife would have done a better job investigating this. Barney Rubble would have done a better job investigating this. Hell, even Maury Povich would have done a better job finding not the father in this case. I am getting ticked off to the nth degree. Early in the investigation, one of the investigators viewing the crime scene thought it might be the work of Odinists practicing Odinism, and this is Holman deposition. So from 33 to 51, all the footnotes just indicate that these are from uh, his from Holman's deposition. So I won't be going up and down. They're all from his deposition, and it looks like all from pages in the 60s. Unified Command's Jerry Holman has forgotten which investigator it was. Early in the investigation, based on the thought that Odinism might explain how the bodies were found and how sticks were arranged on top of the girls, Unified Command sought out an expert. The expert was being sought in order to consider whether the crime scene was indicative of Odinism or some other cult. According to Holman, Sergeant Steve Bucky of the Indiana State Police was in charge of locating the expert. Allegedly, the expert that Sergeant Bucky found was from Purdue. According to Holman, Holman, doesn't know the professor's background, but, but he studies that Norwegian Nordic culture that Odinism is, end quote. Holman admitted that Holman, had never talked to this professor. Holman stated that Sergeant Buckley, I'm sorry, knew the Purdue professor's background. Furthermore, that Sergeant Buckley was, quote, was in communication with them, end quote. According to Holman, the professor, quote, was out of the country at the time. We did not release photos, but we released a sketch of the sticks and how they were laid and some other information, end quote. Having reviewed everything, the professor concluded, quote, that it was not Odinism or any other type of cult worshiping or any other group that would have conducted the crime, end quote. ID. However, Jerry Holman told a different story to Trooper Roland Purdy concerning the conclusions of the Purdue professor. This is going to be 53, so let's go down there. This is from Holman's deposition, page 63, lines 10 through 20. Trooper Purdy began assisting with the investigation in March 2017. However, the first time Purdy ever even heard the word Odin or Odinite was, quote, at least May or June of 2017. This is from Purdy's deposition, page 26, lines 10 through 25. It's also important to note that the first time Trooper Purdy heard the word Odin or Odinite, it wasn't even through Unified Command or any other law enforcement officer, but rather through Becky Patty, who is Libby German's grandmother, 56. That's Purdy's deposition, page 23, lines 1 through 17. Becky Patty, while talking to Trooper Purdy, informed Purdy that Abby Williams had dated Holder's son Logan, and Logan's dad was an Odinist named Brad Holder. 57, that's ID. This information interested Purdy, who then talked to Holman, and Holman told Purdy they'd already run the Styx information and Odin angle through a Purdue professor. 58, Purdy deposition, page 26, lines 15 through 25, and page 23, lines 1 through 17. Holman told Purdy that the results from the Purdue professor were, quote, kind of inconclusive, end quote. 59, Purdy deposition, excuse me, Purdy deposition 9. Page 26, lines 19 through 25. Purdy also believes he was provided, quote, a copy of what Purdue University had provided them, end quote, 60. Purdy deposition, page 28, lines 10 and 11. Upon reviewing that Purdue report, according to Purdy, the Odinite angle was not dead. 61, Purdy deposition, page 8 or 28, lines 19, 10 through 19. In other words, Holman did not tell Purdy, and the reports did not claim that the Purdue conclusions were that, quote, it was not Odinism or any type of cult worshiping or any type of group that would have concluded the crime. Holman has told one story to Purdy and yet another story under oath in a deposition to what the Purdue professor's conclusions were concerning, excuse me, Odinism's involvement in the murders. One second here. The difference between concluding that Odinist and a cult did not commit the murders versus the evidence is inconclusive as to whether Odinists were involved in the murders is significant. In the first instance, such a conclusion could theoretically explain why law enforcement stopped pursuing the Odinite angle. In the second instance, law enforcement would presumably continue to pursue the Odinite cult angle based on stick formations, girl's body positioning, the F painted in Libby's blood on the tree, as well as other strong evidence supporting an orchestrated abduction and ritualistic murdering of the girls. 62. This evidence will be discussed later, but primarily involves social media posts on Brad Holder's Facebook page and witness statements found on a 12-page report that the defense has dubbed the Odin Report. As stated earlier, both Lesenby and Leggett privately believed more than one person were involved based on how much work was needed to leave the crime scene the way it was found. However, if the Purdue report concluded that a band of Odinite cultists were not involved, then arguably it could be the work of one man. It is very telling that Trooper Purdy had been working as an investigator on the case for at least 2 months, March through May of 2017, bor- before having heard the word Odin or Odinite. This fact is evidence that the Odinite angle was abandoned before Purdy became involved in the investigation in March 2017. This point can't be emphasized enough. The Odinite angle was abandoned by March 2017. So these girls were unalived in February. By March, they had said, nothing to see here, nothing to look at. It's all done. We're good. We got this. Y'all, this, y'all. Okay. So, only a few weeks after the girls were unalived, the reason for this abandonment, a Purdue professor had reached a conclusion concerning Odinism and the crime scene. Of course, Holdman tells one thing under oath about that conclusion: Odinism and cults were not involved in the murder, and another thing to Purdy: the results were inconclusive. The report may or may not exist that does not rule out Odinism. The best thing to do to figure out which version of Holman's story to believe, if either, is to go straight to the source, the Purdue professor, and or read the report that the professor prepared. The problem is that as of filing this document, the defense has been told that Unified Command cannot identify the professor and therefore can't locate the professor, and in the end may not ever be able to identify this mystery professor. Footnote 63. Prosecutor Nick McLeland informed the defense of this development in a September 6, 2023 email. Y'all, I can't. Trebuchet directly into the sun at this point. Additionally, the prosecution has not provided the defense with any Purdue report. Presumably, if the state of Indiana had such a report in its possession, then the identity of the mystery professor would be revealed. The only conclusion is the Purdue report is missing, just as the author of the report is also missing. It is unknown if Detective Holman is currently searching for the mystery professor. If so, he will probably never be found because of the incompetence surrounding this investigation. Shots fired. And burn. Ouch. Call the burn unit. And the complete inability to conduct a comprehensive review of all, in all caps, facts and circumstances pointing to the involvement of multiple actors in this crime. To summarize, the crime scene is chock full of signs of cult involvement. At least one law enforcement officer believed that cult, the cult involved may be Odinites. Therefore, very early on in the investigation, United Command claims to have found an expert from Purdue. This expert from Purdue, according to sworn testimony of Jerry Holman, dismissed Odinism and cultism as being involved. The investigators move on from Odinism to the degree that when Trooper Purdy got involved in the investigation in March 2017, Purdy, never even hears the word Odinism or Odinite uttered by anyone in Unified Command. Rather, Purdy hears the word Odinism for the first time in May or June from a fact witness, Becky Patty. Now, this mystery professor can't be found. Two young girls were brutally murdered, and an innocent man sits in Westville being mentally abused by Odinite guards, and Detective Holman can't even identify the Purdue professor that caused the abandonment of the likely source of the murders. It's very difficult to put into words the level of incompetence, or worse, the level of intentionality on display. It would be utterly laughable if the consequence of this dereliction of duty didn't involve life and death, the life of Richard Allen and the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. These are the facts that greatly undermine the credibility of the entire investigation and are embarrassment to the greater law enforcement community. As stated previously, when determining whether a Franks hearing should be granted, the court will determine whether the actions of Tony Leggett, as alleged by the defense, were intentional or reckless. Surely a missing Purdue professor, a missing report would qualify as either intentional or extremely reckless conduct. Luckily for Richard Allen, Detective Murphy was thorough and organized enough to document in great detail his finding on the Odin angle of the investigation. Enter, quote unquote, the Odin report. It seems only prudent that the court would reveal this report in its entirety before reading the remainder of this memoriam. The 12-page Odin report. Sorry, I have to eat some lunch, so I'm trying not to do that on camera because, eating on camera. As part of discovery, defense received a 12-page Word document that provided a summary of Trooper Kevin Murphy's investigation of the Odinite angle. Over time, for reference purposes, the defense has come to call this document, quote unquote, the Odin report. Therefore, to more clearly reference this document throughout the rest of the memo, the defense will use the moniker, quote, Odin report, end quote, to discuss this report. The Odin report was created by Indiana State Trooper Kevin Murphy, who thankfully was independently curious. Aw, way to go, Kevin Murphy. You deserve a gold star at this point. The unified command through Leggett and Hammond had concluded by March 2017 that Brad Holder should be cleared as a suspect, as will be detailed later. Further, Unified Command had claimed that it concluded very early, probably March 2017, that Odinites were not involved, as discussed earlier. Despite Leggett and Holman clearing Holder as a suspect in March 2017, and despite a mystery Purdue professor dismissing all links between Odinism and the murders, Murphy pressed on. Murphy began investigating a man named Elvis Fields down in Rushville, Indiana, 126 miles away, the fruits from this investigation ultimately boomeranged Murphy as well as law enforcement officers Greg Ferenczi and Todd Click back to Brad Holder and therefore back to Odinism. Murphy, Ferenczi, and Todd Click's dogged pursuit of the truth is what we citizens and those accused of crimes should expect out of law enforcement. These honorable law enforcement officers were knocking on doors and conducting interviews, going wherever the evidence led them. Immediately following an interview, Murphy would reduce key aspects of that interview into a Word document. Over time, the Odin report grew from a single page from his first interview with Mary Jacobs to 12 pages, with the last pages used for summing up his thoughts from all the interviews he had conducted. The defense has attached this document to the memorandum and marked it as Exhibit 36. Surprisingly to Murphy, even though he was handing over to Unified Command powerful evidence that really painted a clear picture of who was involved in the murders, Holdman and Leggett did not seem interested. Eventually, Murphy said that Unified Command phased out the Odinite Rush County Angle 64, Murphy deposition page 11, lines 1 through 25. Murphy, figured that this phasing out was due to Unified Command knowing things Murphy, did not know that eliminated the Odinism angle. Murphy further stated, quote, I kind of took my marching orders and just did what I was told and went where I was needed. 65, Murphy deposition, page 11, lines 16 through 22. In other words, Murphy trusted that Unified Command was doing the right thing. Defense would encourage the court to stop and review this document before continuing to read the memorandum, as the Odin report will be discussed over the next several pages. Let me go to the table of contents and see if we actually have the Odin report. Doodle-oo. One day I will be possibly, uh, it doesn't look like we get the Odin report, unfortunately. I mean, it talks about it for 2 pages, but we don't get it. Now, unfortunately, that sometimes happens. And again, the exhibits had a lot of things that, were quite graphic, and there's, you know, a lot of things that I'm sure the victim's family, didn't want them to see or didn't want the whole world to see, so I can understand why they didn't add these things to them, but it is kind of upsetting because I would have liked to at least have seen the report. Who is Brad Holder? Who is Patrick Westfall? Who is Johnny Messer? Who is Elvis Fields? Who is Rod Abrams? Why does the evidence strongly point to these men as having been involved in the murder of Abby and Libby? The Odin report provides much of the information. However, the report is not the only source of evidence provided by the state of Indiana that links these men to the murders. The investigative fingerprints of Todd Click and the late Greg Ferenczi are predominantly peppered through are prominently, peppered through the Odin report as well. Click also prepared a roughly 85-page report and delivered it to Unified Command. However, the defense did not receive this document until September 8th, 2023, nearly 10 months after defense counsel entered their appearance. The defense will now show what Leggett and the rest of Unified Command knew but refused to act on. This information is also what Leggett concealed from Judge Diner. The defense will include the evidence that links these men to the crime scene and to each other, including intimate knowledge that these men had of the crime scene that only someone who had been at the crime scene would know. Brad Holder's connection to the crime scene. Brad Holder's son, Logan Holder, was dating Abby Williams at the time of the murders. No one denies this fact. Amber Holder, for example, discusses this fact on page 9 of the Odin Report. Exhibit 37 is a document memorializing the only known interview of Brad Holder concerning the Delphi murders, at least through August 30th, 2023. In that document, it was learned that Brad Holder details that he was usually in Delphi every weekend visiting his friend Patrick Westfall and attending Astaro religious ceremonies at Patrick Westfall's house, usually on Sundays. Astaro is interchangeable with Odinism. Footnote 66. In a report labeled INC002561, Patrick Westphal described to law enforcement that Astaro was a warrior type religion with many gods, including Odin and Thor. This report is marked Exhibit 39. Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder had been friends prior to the murder of Abby and Libby. In fact, Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder were found in a photograph together as late as January 21st, 2017. Attach a copy of said photograph marked as Exhibit 38. Murphy noted on page 11 of the Odin report that, quote, Westphal appears 10 times in pictures that Holder posts on Facebook prior to February 13th, 2017. However, after February 13th, 2017, Westfall does not appear in any of Holder's post photos. End quote. What happened to the friendship of Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall? Amber Holder tells a very disturbing story. As can be viewed on page 9 of the Odin report, Amber told law enforcement the following. Amber, said Brad spoke of Patrick one time when he was intoxicated and said he and Patrick had got into a fight. Then they no longer speak with each other. He told her that he and Westfall were in the woods near a river conducting a ritual. One of them said or did something that the other did not agree with, and they no longer talked to each other. She said the river was near Patrick's house. Note, Brad has a Facebook post with him and Patrick together on January 21st, 2017. Patrick Westfall was living in Delphi on a certain street in Delphi at the time. So that report is confidential of where he is. This document is a narrative report of what is believed to be the only interview police conducted of Patrick Westfall, 67. Just like Holder's videotaped interview of the date of filing this memorandum, the prosecutor has not turned over Westfall's videotaped interview. We now know that that was recorded over or deliberately destroyed. These a-holes. The address where Westfall was living at the time was 3.1 miles, or roughly a 7-minute drive to the cemetery, which is a close entry point to where the girls were unalived. 68. Find attached a copy of the Google Maps showing pins dropped at Westfall's address and close to where the girls were found, marked as Exhibit 40 and filed confidential. As we know from Exhibit 37 attached to the memorandum, Brad Holder admitted that Holder, spent every weekend hanging out with his friend Patrick Westfall in Delphi and participated in Astaru religious ceremonies on Sundays with Patrick Westfall. The girls were abducted on Monday, February 13th, 2017. Patrick Westfall appeared to no longer be friends with Brad Holder after February 13th, 2017. The defense is unaware as to whether law enforcement were even mildly curious enough to Brad Holder or Patrick Westfall seek Brad Holder or Patrick Westfall out to ask them about explosive information. Amber told the police about an argument over a ritual gone bad in the woods sometime in February 2017. Additionally, Richard Allen's defense team is unaware whether law enforcement saw a search warrant for Brad Holder or Patrick's home. Amber Holder tells a second equally disturbing story. When interviewed a second time, Amber discussed another conversation Amber, had with Brad Holder. She'd gone to Brad Holder's house to visit him. While the children were upstairs, Amber, inquired about Patrick Westfall under the ruse that Amber's girlfriend had a date with Patrick. This is contained on page 10 of the Odin report. Brad became, quote unquote, very nervous and told her she needed to stay away from Westfall or she would end up dead. She said that Brad told her Westfall and, quote, his crew were responsible for the murders of the girls in Delphi and fire killed those two girls. In the fire that killed two girls. She asked I asked her if she knew of any fires in Florida that killed 4 girls, and she was not familiar with any fires that killed any children until Brad mentioned it today. She said Brad may have been talking about that fire, but had the number of killed wrong. She said Brad told her Westfall and his crew had friends in several states, and they had no problems killing quote unquote quote race betrayers. I asked her to clarify what that meant, and she said she believed it meant white people who, date people outside their race because these, people of Walmart, the Timu edition, not even, trademark Walmart people, are ridiculous. Amber said Brad told her that Westfall belonged to a group called the Vinlanders and 22. Brad told her that Westfall had many people backing him up and quote unquote powerful friends. She said that Brad was very nervous while telling her these things and was whispering like he was fearful someone else would hear him. She said that throughout the conversation, Brad was constantly telling her to stay away from Westfall. He told her that Patrick had unalived a lot of people and it didn't matter if they were innocent or not. Amber truly believes Brad is scared of Westfall. Prior to Amber leaving, she said that Brad told her to, quote, stay off of Westfall's radar, end quote, and, quote, I can only protect you so much if you keep asking questions, end quote. Also told her if Westfall found out she was married to him, she would be in danger. Brad also questioned her on why Westfall would be going out on a quote unquote date. He was under the impression that Westfall was married or engaged to someone. Imagine being an investigator trying to solve a horrible murder and having learned all this information. What would a good investigator do? What would good leadership in the form of uniform Unified Command do with this information? We asked the court to think about all the tools that law enforcement had in its arsenal to pursue an investigation once these explosive stories were told. It doesn't appear that Unified Command did anything. The question then may be did they, including Leggett, want to do anything to investigate the Odinites? Was Unified Command and Tony Leggett, a member of Unified Command, acting intentionally or recklessly in the way it conducted the investigation? And by extension, was Leggett acting intentionally or recklessly in concealing this information from Diner in his affidavit or search warrant? What else linked Holder to the crime? On April 7th, 2017, Holder posted a photo of a hand marked with the exact wound found on Abby's body. Attached and marked as Exhibit 14 or 41 is a Facebook post that displays Brad Holder's hand. The photo displays Brad Holder showing off a rune that was inked onto his hand, not a tattoo, but likely from an ink pen. This rune that Brad Holder is proudly showing off is the same rune that killers laid on Abby's body using sticks. This image was posted by Brad Holder approximately 52 days after the murders. The public had no idea what the crime scene looked like, and that Abby had sticks placed on her body like a Hagal rune. Yet, Brad Holder coincidentally was showing off the same rune found on Abby. It should be in that should be important information for curious, honest, and well-intentioned law enforcement officers. Honest Trooper Murphy admitted that the image of the rune drawn on Holder's hand was similar in appearance to the rune found on Abby's body. Footnote 69, Getty. Murphy deposition, page 29, lines 16 through 25, page 30, lines 1 through 12, marked as Exhibit 42, filed as confidential. Trooper Holman, on the other hand, refused to admit that the two images on Exhibit 42 look similar. I mean, it's a stretch. You could say that it's the exact same formation, end quote, is what Holman said when comparing the two. 70, Holman deposition, page 229, lines 15 through 25, and page 230, lines 1 through 5. By admitting these images match or look like each other, Holman would then have to be admitting that Holder should have been a suspect because the rune on his Holder's hand matched the rune found on Abby's body when the details of the crime scene were not known to the public. That is why honest cop Murphy admitted the obvious that the two images look alike, but Holman refused to admit the obvious. Holman has hitched his wagon to Richard Allen's guilt and can't consider any other candidate and certainly can't concede that Unified Command's investigation has been a shameful embarrassment. Therefore, Holman has to continue the charade of proclaiming that the two images contained in Exhibit 42 don't look similar, whether he actually believes it or not. However, while Holman cannot admit that the two images on Exhibit 42 look like one another, Holman is the same person that claimed that, quote, only minor differences, end quote, exist between sketch one and sketch two. Are you flipping flapjack festering hell kidding me? As you will learn later in the memoranda, Sarah Carbaugh claims to have observed a man walking down the road with mud on his clothing around 3:57 p.m. on the day of the murders. The man she observed turned into sketch 1. According to Holman, sketch 1 is the killer Richard Allen, 72, and that is Holman deposition page 114, lines 14 through 25. You will also learn later in the memorandum that Betsy Blair observed a man on the high bridge around 2 p.m. The man she observed turned into sketch 2. According to Holman, this man is also the killer, Richard Allen, 72. Holman deposition page 15 or 115, lines 15 through 25. Wow, this dude really doesn't pay attention. You will later learn that for Leggett and Holman's timeline to work, sketch 1 and sketch 2 need to represent the exact same person, Richard Allen. Sketch 1 is attached as Exhibit 105, and sketch 2 is attached as Exhibit 103. We would ask you, Judge, to take those exhibits out and please look at those. Those two exhibits, according to Holman, are the same person, Richard Allen, and they need to be the same person in order to support Holman's timeline. Yet Holman will not admit the obvious that the men represented in these sketches look nothing like each other, nor like Richard Allen. Needing them to be the same man, Holman testified under oath that only minor differences exist between sketch 1 and sketch 2. This is how entrenched Holman is in his position that Richard Allen is guilty. He can't admit the obvious. To further demonstrate the ridiculousness of Holman's alleged belief that except for quote unquote minor differences, sketch 1 and sketch 2 look alike, let's look at what Toby Lesenby said about sketch 1 and sketch 2. In his sworn statement, Tony Lesenby stated that sketch 1 and sketch 2 are in fact two different men. Footnote 73, Lesenby Depot, page 85, lines 22 to 25, page 86, lines 1 through 25, page 87, lines 1 through 25, page 88, lines 1 through 7. Um, was anyone in charge of this investigation? I'm just asking for a friend. While Richard Allen sits in prison waiting for full disclosure of all evidence in the state's possession, the current sheriff and former sheriff can't even keep their stories straight as to how many men were involved and whether sketch 1 and sketch 2 represent the same man, Richard Allen as Holman claims, or if two different men, Richard Allen and someone else, as Lesenby claims. While Holman will not agree that Brad Holder's Facebook hand rune represents the stick formation found on Abby's body because that promotes Brad Holder as a suspect, at the same time, Holman will tell you that Sketch 1 and Sketch 2 look alike with only minor differences. Very minor, because that promotes Richard Allen as the suspect. How far was Holman willing to stretch this incredible claim? When Holman was asked which resembles each other more, Sketch 1 and Sketch 2, or the two images found side by side in Exhibit 42, Holman claimed that Sketch 1 and Sketch 2 look more alike to each other than the two images found in Exhibit 42 look like each other. We ask the court the same question and see if you have the same answer as Holman. Please look at Sketch 1 and Sketch 2, then look at the side by side images on Exhibit 42. Would you claim under oath that Sketch 1 and Sketch 2 look more alike to each other than the two images found on Exhibit 42 look like alike each other to each other? The fact that Holman refuses to under oath admit the obvious truth should provide insight into whether Holman and his fellow Unified Command member Tony Leggett acted intentionally in concealing information from Judge Diner. Trooper Purdy and Trooper Winters were aware of an eerie image on Brad Holder's Facebook page of what appeared to be a fake murder scene mimicking Abby and Libby's murder scene. When Trooper Purdy learned from Becky Patty and that Brad Holder was an Odinist, at least for a short period of time, he was curious about Brad Holder. This short-term curiosity led Purdy to look into Brad's Facebook page, where Purdy, found a very eerie photograph, 74. Purdy discusses how he viewed the image on Holder's Facebook page. Purdy Depot. Oh, would you stop highlighting everything? Daggone it. Sorry. Page 79, lines 6 through 25, and Depot page 80, lines 1 through 11. This photograph is marked as Exhibit 43. It shows two girls lying on what appears to be the ground of a forest. The girls are either not alive or posed as if they are not alive. The girls have tree limbs arranged over their bodies. The girl in the forefront of the photograph has her left arm and hand positioned very similarly to that of Libby's left arm and hand outstretched up above her head. The defense has compared a side by side photograph of the mimicked photograph compared with a crime scene photograph of Libby, which is marked as Exhibit 44 and filed as confidential. Although both girls are dressed and the limbs on the girls are not arranged exactly like the limbs and sticks on Abby and Libby, the similarity of the photo on Brad Holder's Facebook page is pronounced. Purdy did not think much of the photo in terms of implicating Brad Holder. At least that is what he's claiming now in 2023. Footnote 75, Purdy deposition, page 80, 1 through 25. Purdy talks about the mimicking the murder scene as one piece of a puzzle because the image had been on Holder's Facebook page for as long as 4 or 5 years. It is somewhat depressed. It somewhat depressed the level of Winter's interest in the photograph. However, even before Purdy found that disturbing image on Holder's Facebook page, a tipster had beat him to the punch by finding it much earlier. The contents of a February 16th, 2017 tip was written up in a report designated DIN C00004876. An unredacted copy is attached and marked as Exhibit 45, filed as confidential. This tip came in just 2 days after the girls were found. Y'all, I am sorry. I only speak English. Baker speaks like a bajillion and 12 languages, and I still can't get English right. Doggone it. Oh, okay. I have to go get the ferals very shortly. I think I am going to break this up in 2 parts because this is going to be a monster. So I think I will finish up this page and then break for part 2. So this tip said the following, quote, Father of Logan Holder, ex-boyfriend of Libby's social media shows him a member of Vinlander's post of half-dead woman and fascination with Gothic figures and symbols out of tree branches, ID, emphasis added. This report shows that Leggett actually approved a further investigation of Brad Holder based upon that tip. This very same disturbing image came to attention of law enforcement a third time by way of a gentleman named Brian Brocher from Georgia. This tip was received by Trooper Joseph Winters on April 12th, 2017, and converted into a report. An unredacted copy of this report is attached and marked as Exhibit 46 and marked as confidential. The defense hereinafter will refer to this as the Winters Report. Ryan Berchet has also signed an affidavit detailing his failed attempts to gain the interest of Carroll County law enforcement concerning the information that Boucher had discovered on Holder's social media accounts. The affidavit is attached and marked as Exhibit 47. Boucher's affidavit also details other aspects of the case discussed in this memoranda. As the affidavit details, Boucher talked directly to then Sheriff Toby Lesenby about his findings. This conversation would have occurred sometime before Boucher's April 12th, 2017 conversation with Troop Winters, 77. We have not reviewed any report in which Lesenby memorializes his conversation with Boucher, although it theoretically might be found in the state of Indiana's most recent September 8th, 2023 evidence dump. The state sucks balls. Do-do-do, do-do-do. Let's see. As the affidavit details, Boucher talked directly. Okay. Lesenby told Boucher that Holder was not a suspect and quizzically dispensed of the phone call as detailed in Boucher's affidavit. Despite Lesenby's comments essentially telling Boucher that Holder had been eliminated as a suspect, Boucher was undeterred. Boucher felt something was off and called state police post. As detailed in Winter's report, once Boucher provided his ID, Boucher was then provided Winters with pictures from Holder's media account depicting tree limbs on the ground displaying quote unquote runes consistent with the Odin belief system. Winters report, page 2. Then Winters wrote in the report that, quote, provided media pictures showing unknown girls believed to be deceased with sticks placed over the bodies. The sticks across the females on Holder's media were believed to be symbols or runes. Winter report, page 2, emphasis added. It should be noted that law enforcement has, to this day, still failed to turn over this mimicked murder photograph found on Holder's Facebook page, i.e., Exhibit 43. Fortunately, defense counsel was able to find Winter's report in a sea of evidence and upon reading it understood the potential importance that this photograph may have in terms of Holder's culpability in the murder. The only problem is that law enforcement failed to produce it for the defense. Fortunately, through due diligence, the defense team located Boucher, drove to Georgia, met with Boucher, who was willing to provide the images to Richard's defense team, and did in fact turn those images over to Richard Allen's defense team, even as recently as at his August 23rd, 2023 deposition. Winter stated he was still unable to locate the images referenced in Winter's reports. Aw. That Boucher had provided Winters back on April 12th, 2017. Footnote 78, Winters Depot, page 29, lines 20 through 25. So Winters lost the damn report and the photos? Sure. This means that if the defense team had not traveled to Georgia, it the defense would still not be in possession of this exculpatory piece of evidence and would not have been able to ask questions at the deposition to law enforcement concerning these images. To this very day, the state of Indiana has yet to turn over the images that Boucher provided to Winters back in 2017. Following his interaction with Boucher, as can be read in Winters' report, it was apparent that Trooper Winters' interest was peaked. Details surrounding the February 14th, 2017 crime scene was a well-guarded secret hidden from the public, yet somehow Brad Holder, an Odinite whose son dated Abby Williams, had one, an image on his Facebook page that closely resembled the crime scene, and two, appeared to have used ink to draw a rune on his hand that mimicked the very rune that was found on Abby. Both images are described in Winters' report. So, what did Winters do when he realized it appeared Abby's boyfriend's dad, Brad Holder, appeared to know intimate details about the crime scene kept confidential from the public? He spoke with Jerry Holman. Winters' report, page 2. The information that Winters unearthed fired via Ryan Boucher was so impactful on Winters that Winters, remembers talking with Jerry Holman of Unified Command 79, Winters' deposition. So all of these are from Winters' depositions and Winters' report. Uh, Winters even recorded the following in his report, quote, "I talked to F. Sergeant Holman on," I mean, F. Sergeant Holman seems about right at this point. "On April 12th, 2017, Sergeant Holman advised the FBI had interviewed Holder shortly at the beginning of the investigation," Winter's report, page 2. In his description, provided his reasoning. Quote, "Yeah, I think there's some substantial things we need to follow up on." At the In the same deposition, Winters also said he, quote, "wanted to make sure all the information I had captured in my time from that was passed on because I had just taken that information. I just wanted to make sure I had no contact with anyone involved in this case again. They were very aware I generated that if I had no contact with anyone involved in this case again, that they were aware I generated this supplement." So this officer went out of his way to let Unified Command know that he had gone through this, he'd gotten this, and he was very intrigued by this. Winters felt that the Boucher tip was important. He also felt it was so important, he wanted to make sure someone followed up on the lead by, at minimum, re-interviewing Brad Holder. Again, it should be noted, as of September 11th, 2023, the defense has still not received the February 17th, 2017 interview of Holder. Even the state of Indiana's most recent discovery dump, which occurred on September 8th, 2023, did not contain Holder's February 17th, 2017 interview. That's because they destroyed it, like Mission Impossible. That is where I'm going to leave off for right now. I'm going to get started downloading and processing this, and then when I get back from, where I when I pick up the boys, I will go on to part 2 because this is a very dense section, so there will need to be a part 1 and a part 2 to this because holy goodness, there is a lot of meaty stuff in this, and I could have done, you know what? Like I said, Barney Fife could have done a better job at this. They really could. Anywho, thank you for watching this. I know it's a slog. I know it's a not great case, but we definitely need to go through this. This is looking more and more like they have a patsy, an innocent man in jail, and they are pulling out all the stops to persecute an innocent man because they don't. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Nothing seems to make sense in this case, and we've seen a lot of crazy cases in our time, but this one seems to make none of the sense. So I will see you guys in a little bit. I'm going to start working on this case or this video download, and then I will talk to you guys again and start up on the next part in just a little bit. Have a great day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.